Hey, familiar. Hi, Bobby. How are you? Had nothing better to do on a Thursday night?
Yeah, just for him. Oh, it's just more. It's a more.
So storage and
Oh, no.
things that are important to you. Well, I like now on my street, now that Francis is done, like the cul-de-sac, where's this now gonna go? Mhm.
How you doing?
Yeah.
Well, you never know, right?
And I don't know if you don't mind.
Well, a little more than a compliment.
Hey, you know.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. Over the court.
What I mentioned.
I haven't, I figured cheese.
I don't. You-
Oh, I have jumped too fast, but just want to let you know. Rents will be.
You're on all these other committees.
Well.
But my husband does, just goes hiking.
I'm pretty sure I know.
It's probably on a hike right now.
You probably talk to them more often than I walk past my house. From the road above.
He did it when he was a teenager. And then everything else happened. Yeah, I was a little.
It was.
Yeah, he's doing like online, like.
Yeah, nice.
Absolutely.
Exactly. He got himself a really nice.
Well,
life.
Oh, okay.
All these chords and.
Chris has been doing that too. And he has an electric guitar, but he does not play that with him. Well, the acoustic, I don't work.
Mine to give away. Yeah, yeah. The applicant is driving. Yeah, still don't forget. There's last plan meeting for Prospect, and they had been driving. Casey's. Goes on.
No, I didn't. I misremembered it. I misremembered that from. I remember it was a crash.
Oh. There was some. But of course, I wasn't super familiar with that.
It's a. It's.
We're gonna be voting on the project. And. Well, they are really nice people left. I think you, I know better than that. We didn't even get pizza. Yeah. It was funny. There was something good. Oh, zoning requirements.
Are we down to the? There's all of these already.
Which, oh,
Right on. Hi, Lauren. Lauren, you missed us.
Did you mess with the roll at all? So carved it all up with the carbonite.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, you can always use that carving knife. To do the edges.
I just didn't come check out this, you know, the neighborhood.
Good.
Okay.
All right, well, I will be-
How is it sitting on that side of the table?
All right, well, I just want to call.
Cause you
I
can
love
get up, leave whenever you want.
Okay.
My response was you guys.
Okay, where were we?
You have to prospect, right? Pittsburgh, I guess, Oh, right.
In this, anything that is 0.9 or less.
Thank you for the food. Thank you.
That density.
It's the street.
And then associated, there are 3 means, or not 3 means, 3 group plan launch. I mean, it's lessons on it. Yeah.
Not a good one, huh?
What we told him is gonna happen. All the real. See that right. You know, going for it. You get there some. Yeah, but you get there at 7:15, you're through. I'm supposed to have a photo tour, although. Say, you know, like you on weekends. Monsoons every weekend. 4 hours tomorrow morning, but. Reading Noah's forecast. Yeah, I'm not capital letters, but he's like. Confidence is not.
That one. Please, I hope.
Really don't.
Huh? Oh, no, it's gonna be giving me a slice of cheese. Thanks.
Keep your job, drive around.
I thought you were trying to clear my plate. I was like, no, I'm not done. Okay, thank you. Now I got it done.
Oh, it is. Been this something. I heard you say something landed.
Well, it would have to be my keys then, right?
So tell her.
That's home.
And then Glenn was, so we formed this multi-jurisdictional housing commission. Now ask.
Yeah, well, we're trying to. Yeah. The thing. No kidding. One time we were here till like 30. I was thinking,
So,
Today,
restart is testing.
What's that?
like, you can restart it, so the whole strategy is like.
My mouthful.
Oh, come on.
Development neutral. That people from anywhere. It's like subset, household. And,
Throw one on there.
and then basically we see ourselves.
Does anything
going
matter?
after State money. That program.
Oh, that's- I got you.
Ready by thing, October.
Hey.
Um,
Power block.
Yeah, we've got to have these programs.
I don't know.
Calling the executive director, but like, in the industry. consultant. Those programs.
So, this is. It's so bad. Oh, Jesus.
I thought you sleep well.
I got a hard.
I hope you're gonna sleep well.
I mean, the only thing I'm gonna bother is my dog, so I think.
Probably a day.
And he.
He's worse.
Yeah, I saw the dog bowl in your
Chair.
office. Kind of dog is it?
So,
Yeah.
so then the housing director.
He's the, bloodhound black labs.
Chair, yeah.
So, yeah.
Mom.
It was like black.
Person and I hammer everything else for being.
Good.
12.
Oh, wow.
Old man with a nice white reins.
One of the big, bigger ones. Construction.
Hillary, you let us know when you're ready, because you're doing most of the talking, and we just continue to eat.
I'm just gonna talk in my mouth full, that's.
No, okay, great. Go for it.
Yes.
Try to remember to ask.
Right.
Carlos, can you yell down the hall and see if any of the troops are still down there?
Yes.
Yes. They're,
Like.
no, there's something else that owns the sun. And they hired Green Villages to do the financial overall. Building, but they hired him with Peter's guy that I hate here. We talking the figures, it's like. Good. That was so good. I was like, oh, that's crazy.
We need to get gavels, you have a gavel.
This year.
That's for those really rowdy people.
Don't make me use it.
Now.
Yeah.
Gone through the roof.
I have literally
Messing down there.
only gavelled one person in 26 years.
Yeah.
Exercise a lot of different things.
We missed that.
It's gonna wait in for us.
We're back.
Go and just going ahead without Carlos.
Mhm.
You can catch up. All right.
Seen a lot of this.
Yeah, he's not as familiar with the revised application, but yes, he has a lot of this. So the community housing plan fundamentally has not changed since the last submittal. However, we'll touch upon it because the last time we talked about this application was in February, pretty much my first week with the town. So the annexation agreement has been already discussed, requires the completion of 17 community housing units prior to the issuance of any certificate of occupancy for a given free market unit. So the applicant has proposed 40 dormitory, is it bedrooms?
Yes. Let's go with that.
Units, in lieu of the 17 units, the distinction that would be required to the community housing guidelines. So as discussed, it's something that will receive probably a lot of attention at town council initially, at, the, pre-application. They were amenable to the idea, but still this ultimately needs to be approved by town council. The dormitory units would be, developed in tandem with, the Rumble campus. And it is our understanding that they would also serve the Rumble campus, with some ability to, flex within that to provide housing opportunities for, seasonal employees. Is that also correct? Great. So the applicant is willing to construct the dormitory facility in advance of the Rumble project at the town's discretion.
So just one thing really quickly, and I realize why you interpreted it that way. We were saying that if, for whatever reason, if Rumble didn't happen or something like that, that it's the 17 units we would build in
Oh.
advance of Rumble if the town
Wherever.
wanted it, right? Does that make sense? Like,
Totally
so
makes sense.
we may say, okay, if Rumble's not doing the dorms, or we want to do the 17 units as duplexes or small lot units or, townhouses, something like that.
Do you have a location in mind?
Any one of the tracks?
Yeah, any of the tracks that would allow community housing, which is pretty much all of them.
Again, that speaks to Sarah's question at the end of the tract discussion where community housing would be provided. It will be provided within the village of Mount Crested Butte, however, not on a particular parcel. For example, it might not make sense in the dense village core where SGRs are permitted to have community housing there, put those community housing units where SDRs aren't permitted and, kind of contribute to more of that neighborhood feel with year-round residents in those given tracts. So that's again speculation, not necessarily what will happen, but just a thought that came to my mind as I was reading through this particular application. So again, the 17 units or 40 dormitory bedrooms that all would be within the overall residential cap for this development. As pointed out earlier, should the village realize this whole build out with the accommodation and all of the commercial floor area, and that would include the civic space. There would be a total of 88 community housing units, and then the balance obviously would be a fee in lieu. Individual tract development will generate different employee housing needs depending on the number of residential units, the number of commercial floor area on a given tract. So each tract as they're coming through will need to provide that community housing plan just to ensure that they're aligned with guidelines. And the applicant has not proposed to memorialize the existing community housing regulations, and that this will potentially flex over time. That's my understanding.
As amended.
As amended. So if we change our community housing guidelines, the given tract development will need to comply with whatever is in effect at that time. And then lastly, they've emphasized that they encourage public-private partnerships to develop community housing in excess of any obligations generated by the development within a given tract. Any questions on the community housing?
Heather said earlier that there will be no cash in lieu of. I can't imagine that each tract is gonna come up with whole number math. So what about like this 0.37 or the fractions that might come on an individual tract? I would assume we would allow cash for those.
Yeah, we would allow, you're not,
For the
like, you're not
fraction.
building a third of the unit, for example, that would be though. Based on what the code says. So right now, that's what the code allows for, is be a little bit fractional, and I don't imagine that changing, because it's pretty difficult to build a third of a house.
But if you add up all of the different builders and their obligation, you can have,
We have that
a
everywhere,
lot of
though, if you think about development
fractions.
in a given, on a given street.
Mhm.
So say you're just in like CBA. And you're building out a street and somebody else builds out a different area, like there's gonna still be fractional, FTEs generated for different developments, and that's just part of it, is that, you know, we won't have perfection, and we'll have some fractional units, but it's gonna be marginal compared to the overall number of community housing units that are developed on a given property, or I'm sorry, on a given
Track.
the overall area.
So is there one developer per track?
That
Could be, or it could have multiple developers
Sure.
per track, so then you'd have multiple potential fractional things per track.
But
Per track.
it would be.
Yeah.
In theory, it would only be one fraction per tract generated, like if an entire tract is built out at a given time. And you have, That
Oh, okay, so
actually
you have a whole track is developed all at once.
It
Yes,
could
that is-
generate
yeah.
8.2.
point
So it-
two.
Oh, so it
you have
isn't, even though you
here.
might have two builders, they're gonna work together and they're gonna develop that whole track all at once.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
you should envision it per application in a way. So if three
Mm-hmm.
people come in and they're the developers, but your track 14 is one application.
Oh, okay,
It would have a community housing plan for track 14. and
Okay.
It might generate a 0.2.
yeah, no, I
And
was, I
you'll always
was
want
mistaken.
that.
I thought it would be, you know, a
But it won't be that
developer.
clean on the single family residence.
And you'll
though.
Yeah.
obviously collect that fee in lieu anyway. so
Right.
We can have that put back into a project wherever to compensate, so that
Mhm.
you do get the accumulate, like I said, if everybody, if 14 tracks have 0.1 left. You know, that will get you to one eventually, but.
You'll
you'll
accumulate
have it,
that.
and You can do with it as you will.
Yeah, I was just envisioning mistakenly that it was gonna be, you know, a couple different builders per track coming in at different times and each having their own requirement for community housing, but if it's all together at once on one track, then.
I'm just writing a note to check, make sure that it's very clear on, you know, the fractional unit component. We don't have an expectation that somebody's building a third of the house.
Well, in the dormitory facility referenced in your third item is actually not the dormitory facility, it's units.
No, it's bedrooms.
The applicant is willing to construct the
Yeah.
dormitory facility okay, I'm sorry, in advance. It shouldn't be the dormitory facility, it would be the 17 units.
Correct.
Our plan says the village at Mount Crested Butte is prepared to build these units prior to the Rumble project if the council of Mount Crested Butte deems that a preference. It's just that I didn't say the 17,
Yeah.
not.
It said these.
Rumble
units, so
was
I
there.
like, these units are the door units. So again,
It's
it's like,
Fine, I
We
just,
just need to
big
add.
application, there's a lot of nuance in it, so I appreciate that. point of
that's why we're here.
Yep,
And yeah,
yeah, so we'll tweak that.
we will make sure that that language is clear. Well, the applicant will.
So
Then I
on,
will capture that the next time. I
so on that note, though, it sounds like this is getting pushed down the road
I'm sorry,
in terms of timing. I thought I heard earlier the affordable housing needed to be one of the first things built, but we also heard that
So wait-
RMBL is phase 2.
so phase one is utilities and roads.
Oh, okay. You can see, I didn't get to that page.
No worries.
And we literally say no certificate of occupancy shall be issued for any free market prior to the satisfaction of that requirement. Whether Rumble does it or we do it.
Good. Before we get to phasing, we're gonna talk about wetlands. So the developable areas, as we had mentioned, have been established based on wetland buffer standards, designated open space, et cetera. So this table shows that, and all of the wetland buffers are 50 feet. There has been previous conversation that there were 100-foot buffers. Those are only required for fens, so there's no code-based requirement to exceed or have buffers in excess of 50 feet. So the applicant has met the requirement for those buffer standards. It should be noted that there will be some wetland impacts as a result of this project, and those are specific to the Boulevard Road and crossing over the wetlands. They would be required to get a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer permit for any of those impacts. Also, because it'd be likely disturbing over an acre stormwater discharge permit from the state. And they would have to go through their process and their permitting and showing that they are trying to minimize those impacts as best as possible. But that is a separate process from any town process. For the wetland areas, you can, well, I don't know if you can, everybody can see, but there's the large wetland complex to the north. And there will be a trail crossing in that area and a road crossing to access tract 10. The roads again will be will go through the core permit process, and there will not be a core permit required for any trail crossings because they are going to be doing this in nature in using structures, elevated structures to cross those wetlands. Nancy, you have a question? No, okay.
No, just gazing off and
All right, just want to make sure that I'm addressing all your questions. So the applicant has provided a wetland mitigation and restoration plan. They're going to partner this mitigation with Rumble to ensure that we have ecologically functioning wetlands and the appropriate wetland vegetation for the restored areas. There are 4 areas that will be restored on this overall site. There's a erosional gully that's flowing, it's basically flowing laterally from the Molensic ditch. And they will, and so you can see the cut there, so they will repair that cut to make it so it's not increasing the amount of sediment discharge into the wetlands that currently is, and it actually functions as a more complete wetland. They will also restore a similar large erosional gully that is formed below the pre-sediment pond. They will also restore a head cut stream. They will restore a kind of marshy wetland, if you will, within a large wetland complex associated with that the ditch erosional gully. And restoring these wetlands does have a great ecological benefit in terms of macroinvertebrate habitat, helping to maintain optimal water temperatures, so cooler water temperatures. And in return, the sediment discharge will improve the overall water quality of these wetlands and the associated riparian areas that they flow into. Are there any questions on the there's no, there's none. Is there any questions on the wetland mitigation and restoration plans?
What is a macro invertebrate?
So those are your little bugs that live in the waters.
Oh.
Big bonus.
So I grew some, so I,
Fancy word.
yeah, so I.
Not a fancy word, but yes.
Like, so I grew some language in there by accident, sorry. Not by accident, just by habit.
So would the responsibility for repairing the damage below the pre-sediment pond fall to water and sand?
That would be great.
I'm just asking a question. I don't know who got there first.
Possibly.
I don't want to state whether or not they would be responsible for that on record. I don't know.
Fair enough.
I'll be happy to ask Mike. That's a good idea.
If I was sitting out there, I would.
Any other questions on the wetlands? The trails plan, we've discussed this a lot in the past, and this has been shored up a lot. We'll get into how this all gets built, how this is managed on the next slide. We're doing the high level view of this right now in terms of the overall connectivity that this plan creates on this site. Creating year-round recreation opportunities with that multi-use commuter trail along the village boulevard and along the to the village loop there. A series of urban sidewalks, which is a fairly novel concept for Mount CD. A multi-use recreational trail, hiking and biking trails, and then a primitive trail. The trails plan includes trail design criteria. And the types of uses that will be permitted, the surface treatments for each of those, the maximum width for any of those elements, and the location of those particular trails. So the multi-use commuter trail and the urban sidewalks will be located, or proposed to be located within the right of way. The multi-use recreational trail, because that is a larger trail, will be located within an easement to be located at final plats. And then the hiking and biking trails will be managed using use licenses, and this is a pretty common tool with regard to managing trail locations within, say, land trust lands. And what this allows for is greater latitude in that trail alignment to respond to, say, you cut a trail and then you have erosion. I mean, hopefully with Simba's involvement, we won't have those issues because we'll get it built the right time, but I'm sure we've all experienced trail relocations at some point, and they won't have to go through the Master HOA, who will be maintaining all of these trails, will not need to go through any sort of additional process such as amending an easement in order to change these alignments. Are there any questions on the trail design criteria? Yes, Nancy.
The use license, I don't really understand those. You have a residential area and you're going across residential lots. How do you get a trail in there?
Well, so all of the trails that are use license are not, they're past the tracks and they go up into the open space. So those are primarily located on the open space. And so just picture a use license like has all of the uses, but doesn't locate it, like an easement has to locate it on the land, you know, meets and bounds kind of thing. In use license just says, here's approximately where it'll be. It's located on this track. These uses are allowed. You're held harmless, we're held harmless.
So it's not going on any tracks that are going to be developed?
No, anywhere that we had to cross the track, you would go ahead and do an easement. And then that's like but I think all of those were removed, if I remember correctly.
I think so.
And then who gives the permission for the use license? Who do
Yeah,
you apply
so,
to
so right now we have kind of, you know, other entities. So for example, it might be Fantasy Ranch had a use license for that horse track, right? The equestrian that puts them up above. Simba might have the use license for the access trails that go up to Snodgrass.
License is permission, can be revocable, where an easement is a right established property right. Which is the easement and license, and I think I'm talking with Simba, their preference, or at least when we build trails, is not an easement, but a license. It's essentially a license agreement. It's the same thing that we were talking about.
And if anybody develops a tract and they want to tie a trail into the trail, that's all fine, but that would be at their own discretion on a track by track basis.
So regarding the actual build out of the trails and the maintenance of these trails, broken down by the types of trails again. So correct me if I'm wrong, in the phasing, is this unique to the trails plan, or is it tied to the overall phasing of the project with the commuter and recreation trails? My understanding that because it's a part of that circulation, because it's part of the road network, those would be constructed in phase one before anything else goes in. And so that would be the master developer. The first thing we see in this area in terms of the trail plan. And those maintenance agreements would be held with the master association because of they're not located specifically on a given tract. Actually, all of the maintenance agreements would be held by the master association because they're not on any one individual tract. So the hiking and biking trail that connects the Snodgrass parking lot to the Snodgrass Trail would also be a part of that phase one. So we see that connectivity being, established, when the road goes in. And that use agreement would be held with Simba. And then the urban sidewalks are gonna be phased, a mix of phase one and phase two. And those connect the destinations within the site. And again, those will be constructed by the master developer, the master association, bless you. And the primitive trail, connecting, Fantasy Ranch or whoever the house horse outfitter ends up being, would be a part of phase three. So phase three, and we'll get to that in a moment here, is like the build out of the rest of the site. Any questions on the, trail, sequencing, maintenance matrix?
Lisa.
On the previous.
Oh.
Let's stick to this one and then we'll get to.
So are the developers of the parcels going to be required to connect their buildings to some, all, any of these trails?
Don't have it in there that way right now.
And
They'll all be adjacent to sidewalks and the, you know, the whole regular rec path thing, obviously, because they'll tie into those at each of their entrances. So they'll be connected from that perspective, but as I said, for like if they want to go out the back side of their tract and tie into one of the others, they can, but they're not required to.
Question that was on a previous slide.
The previous slide, it's a clarification question. So urban sidewalks, walking, running, biking, e-biking. So you would allow e-biking, but not biking on some sidewalks? Or am I reading this incorrectly?
That's-
The second one.
So, and I think that's universally biking on some sidewalks to be prohibited, so e-biking, it does not matter whether or not your bike has a motor, it would not be allowed on that sidewalk. That's how I interpret that, so we would just ask the applicant to clarify that in the guide.
Just if I walk on Mount Crested View bike or how would you police that? Because I guarantee there's gonna be people wandering all over the subdivision on their bikes, their e-bikes. They're on all the roads going up and down Mount Crested View, all around the roads.
Well, and they're allowed on the commuter trail, and that's a really key component. So what our commuter trail is called is the one that connects to your rec path,
Okay.
and
so
they are allowed on that.
I'm asking about urban sidewalks.
Right.
How are you gonna?
So then, police dismount, that kind of thing, and I guess if it becomes a huge issue, the HOA steps in.
Bollards.
It's similar to, I would ask, if I may.
Barbed wire.
It's no different than the signs that are in Snodgrass right now.
Right.
That say no e-biking. It's a matter of self-policing, and sometimes you just have to trust that adults will be adults and also realize some adults can be kids. Or children, I mean, it's not mutually,
It's like the trail code.
yeah.
Yep.
It's an honor system and, while it's a good question, I'm not sure if we're gonna have one of our officers out there manning the.
It's enforced,
I don't know.
it's enforced through social media shaming.
Yeah, I mean, and so, so first level is, I think, that self-policing, next level is the HOA kind of stepping in and figuring out how they can do some ticketing and things like that, or, whatever.
on
Next
the,
I
level
would say it's a good
policing.
problem to have. That means they're not in cars.
Spike strips.
yeah,
Good point.
on the,
Then they're, like, I've almost got run over by e-bikes. So,
Bet it was a rental.
Because they're renting them now everywhere.
mhm. On the recreation trail in the winter, where you have Nordic Track, is that gonna be fee-free if it's run by CB Nordic?
So our very first conversations with Nordic was that likely, yes, a lot of the way it operates right now, you need a much more significant system for anyone to want to come pay for it. So they see really trying to do the same. They'd have a use license, groom some of those tracks, and it would be a free and open space.
Cool.
Moving on to a different mobility, let's talk about traffic and transportation, and as already noted, so I won't go into again, there's a commuter trail in, Main Boulevard that connects the village to the recreation path. There will be 7 bus stops, that will be constructed during phase 1 of the project, and, so just to be clear, it's the horizontal component of the bus stops, and no shelters or other elements would be installed during that construction, and it's my understanding that it would be up to Mountain Express to install those elements, is that correct?
I mean, it'd be in partnership. It's just that we wouldn't put up the vertical until they were ready with their service plan to service. So in the transportation plan, we talk about the existing money that also goes in, so like a per unit allocation, those were in the annexation agreement. So our hope is you're kind of putting that in place, and then that's helping to put the service in place and build the vertical.
Thank you for clarifying that. There was a traffic generation report. That study has been adjusted to align with the current density that has been proposed. And the changes in those figures have been outlined at the very end of the handout that I emailed out earlier today, and your printouts available on the chairs over there. Where you can see the overall reduction in the number of trips. So the original proposal is the 900 units. And now that basing it on the maximum number of residential units and the total number of commercial, which has not changed over the course of this project, you have a 42% reduction in the total number of trips because of the reduction in the number of units that are being proposed as part of this project. Excuse me. One thing to note is that there are a number of improvements that have been identified at Gothic Road to allow for ingress and egress from this site, which includes having designated lanes for the left and right turns and one northbound left turn lane onto Gothic Road. So that's essentially an ACL type lane, but you wouldn't really be achieving highway speeds. It would just be more to deal with the disbursement of merging traffic from the Village Boulevard Road to Gothic Road. The traffic study did find that there would be 2 improvements needed at Treasury Road and Gothic Road. And then it actually did find that these recommended improvements would be needed with and without this project. And I can reference this study. The current, if the base area were built out today, it would significantly impact those intersections during peak times. So think Christmas and the week between Christmas and New Year's, for example. We would be seeing what's called the level of service D, which is where you are waiting a pretty significant amount of time, relatively to people that live here, I should say, a significant amount of time to take a left hand turn movement from Treasury onto Gothic Road. But I think one of the other important things to note is that if we have that many people at the base area, that also means we have vitality at the base area. Fortunately, those are mutually inclusive properties. So again, I can say anecdotally, and I'm not a traffic engineer, I just worked at a traffic engineering firm for 7 years, that the traffic study that the North Village team has provided and the traffic studies that the town has completed as part of the master plan are in alignment with regard to the travel demands. However, our plans don't necessarily recommend signalization or the creation of turn lanes at this intersection at this time.
At Treasury, right?
At Treasury,
Yeah.
correct.
And then where's this westbound? Is that also Treasury? Or is that?
I'm sorry, so yeah, both of these bulleted, improvements, the signalization and the one westbound left turn lane and one southbound left turn lane. So think of just your more difficult movements on and off of Treasury. Those would, require, or they're recommending, I should say, turn lanes to accommodate for that. So the westbound turn lane is gonna be the, getting a little turned around on this, but I believe that would be a designated turn lane off of Gothic onto Treasury, and then a left-hand turn lane off of Treasury to Gothic in order to drive south.
This doesn't make any sense. Because it's actually eastbound off of Gothic to, that's a left-hand turn onto Treasury. Not a west. There's no place to go if you go west off of Gothic. At Treasury.
So the westbound left turn lane is if you were on Treasury, you were actually driving westbound in the left to make a left turn movement. So that's on one westbound left, because you were driving in that way. And I'm sorry, I got flipped around. And then the southbound left turn lane is where you were coming down Gothic, and if you want to take a left on a Treasury, there should be a designated lane to make that turn movement because you're crossing traffic.
Sure doesn't read that way, but okay, that makes sense.
Sorry, I just direct copy and paste for the traffic.
I know, I remember reading it then too.
Engineers are really good at data, someone's not so good with words. So hopefully I've cleared that up for everybody in this room. You're welcome.
I remember seeing the traffic report that was done from the core down. And as I recall, Hunter, the access onto Hunter Ridge had a level of service of F at peak time. So that didn't take into account the traffic that's going to be introduced with the village. So I was wondering what the recommendations for that would be.
The recommendations from the master plan studies.
Or, I mean, we're impacting all of Gothic in the core.
So
and
for Hunter
south.
Hill Road, the peak traffic is based on that Christmas week and not. That's when the traffic counts are taken.
Mhm.
And so there weren't any recommendations that came out of that to signalize that intersection. The reason for that is because that's Christmas week. It doesn't represent every single day of the year, and that level of infrastructure is something that we don't have necessarily the capacity for at that intersection to make those turn movements. And again, we're speaking about a limited part of our season, not like the overall year in terms of having that level.
Well,
of
I mean,
service.
summer.
Yeah.
Come on. I'm just saying, if they're saying they need, to put a signal in on Treasury, they're gonna need something on Hunter Hill because it's people coming up Gothic or going down Gothic to Cresty Butte for whatever reason, or
I'll
the
let
people
applicant
coming up.
speak to an additional traffic study that it sounds like you're suggesting.
Well, it's the one that was done for the master plan. And they looked at the Hunter, the Snowmass Hunter Hill
Yeah.
Road, and the level of service that they documented was an F.
So I hear what you're saying. What are you asking of the applicant or with regard to this application? In
Well, I
relation to
would-
that study?
I guess I would like some recognition that that's going to be an issue. I mean, if we're putting in a recommendation for signalization at Treasury, shouldn't we be putting a recommendation in for how that's going to be
I want to be
handled?
clear that staff has not put that recommendation in. That recommendation was provided by their traffic engineer. I'd like to be clear about that. That's not a staff recommendation.
Okay, well, then I'd like a recommendation for how we're going to handle those other intersections.
So what I'm hearing is that you, and I'll let the applicant speak to this, but what I'm hearing is that you want to understand if there is analysis done at the Hunter Hill intersection with regard to this, the traffic generated by this development. Is that correct?
Well, I know there wasn't because they didn't incorporate the master plan traffic study did not incorporate the village traffic. They just incorporated build out at the
It's still not
core.
The base area, so this.
Right.
The applicant would then need to do analysis on the additional demands created by this development, not. The master plan can only analyze what's approved, and so that's kind of the nuance between these two concurrent processes, is that there's no entitlement associated with. This, in the master plan, the scope of work for that particular study was all in the base area. Now, the scope area, or I'm sorry, the scope was developed before my time with the town, so I can't
Yeah.
speak to that.
Yeah, I understand that, but the bottom line is there's going to be a lot of traffic. We had a level of service documented by the master plan study at the Hunter Hill Snowmass intersection of level of F, not taking into account the village traffic. So you just add 2 and 2 together, that means that it's going to be F plus or F minus level of service. And I don't see anywhere.
But it didn't take into consideration that.
It did not. I specifically asked that question at the stakeholders meeting.
It was just the base.
It was just the base area build out.
That scope was developed, so I don't want to go down the road of talking about the master plan study, because that's not what's on the table. What I'm hearing is that you might want to direct your comments to the applicant about the need for additional study at this particular intersection. Is that correct?
I guess I don't understand why we would need an additional study since we already have that study. I mean, it seemed like you could just add the results together, maybe, well, I'm naive in traffic studies, but I don't mean to hold up, but I mean, there's obviously a traffic issue and it doesn't seem like it's being addressed or satisfied. There's no,
But is the traffic created by the village, the one making that intersection an F, or is it the one that is created by the base area build out? And then that's not the applicant's. They contribute, but I think their contribution is minor compared to what potentially could be built out with the base area.
well, then I guess we could say the same thing in the Treasury intersection.
They did.
Which is
That
what
is the
this, it
conclusion.
actually, the conclusion was, is that whether this was. We already would need those improvements.
Okay, so then I guess we would already need those improvements for the Hunter Ridge, and I'm wondering what is going to happen.
Well,
Hunter
that's not
Hill,
really, that question is not really germane to this application. It's a different topic. I mean, it's not
Okay.
completely germane to this. I mean, it's far too broad for this applicant to be required to try to answer.
So both intersections need help if this went away. And so I don't think we can ask them to solve a problem that's not, that they're not causing. Yes, there may be contribution, but not causing.
okay, so
My understanding from that earlier discussion was that if the traffic signal was installed at Treasury, it would help provide traffic breaks further downhill, downstream, including Hunter Hill.
Absolutely.
But
Okay.
what we're hearing is that staff has indicated that
I don't know about Treasury, I don't want to go down the road of talking about what we're doing with our transportation infrastructure throughout town. I'd like to keep this conversation focused on the impacts that are generated by this particular development. We can certainly have a larger conversation about overall transportation solutions through the master planning process, but I don't believe at this time it's entirely appropriate to talk about the functionality of those two intersections unless we are directing the applicant to do their own study at that intersection. I just don't understand how the conversation about what are we gonna do about our traffic, because it's already at a level F. Now it's a very broad conversation that requires it's just not appropriate, because it's not a part of this application.
Agreed.
So I just want to make sure that there is some degree of consensus here. We don't always get consensus, but with regard to the Hunter Hill and Gothic Road intersection and this project, is there any request of the commission to do any additional work, or would the applicant team like to discuss or speak to this issue at this time?
I guess I would
It's
like
been
this,
said.
yeah, the staff to evaluate that. I mean, you said the commission, you mean
I'm asking for direction from the.
for
commission.
direction, the
Yes.
commission.
To either provide direction to the applicant on something that they need to satisfy. I'm trying to, I understand your concern with the level of service at that intersection, but that is a part of the master planning process and not a part of this application. So I'm trying to understand the nexus between the two, so we can advise the applicant appropriately. That way, they are addressing the things that the planning commission wants to see in order to recommend, the application move forward in the process.
Mhm. Well,
The consensus does not seem to support asking additional information from the applicant.
Yeah, I can't see what they could ask. I mean, what they could do. We already have the study done in the two places and so I guess I have no further requests. I don't know how to go from here. I mean, there's definitely a traffic issue and everybody wants to ignore it and then let's
Well, it's
go
not
on.
Not the applicant's responsibility.
No, that's what I'm
Part of
saying. It's
this
not.
application.
Yes,
I think we should move on.
And
Yes.
it's Under this bigger town issue that can't be blurred with what we're doing right now.
Okay.
Not ignoring. Please don't say things like that.
So the application has included, 3 types of road standards, the 2 collector road types, so that's the Boulevard and Village Loop, that would be completed as part of phase 1, and then collector roads, that serve the individual tracks within, as those are built out. For nobody can see the table. Todd, can you scoop the
The Zoom window.
window over to the left?
Oh. I'll see if I can-
thank you.
Go.
Awesome.
All right, so the town has dimensional standards for these different road types. The collector road and, the Boulevard and Village Loop are being provided 60 feet of right of way, which does comply with town standards. The dimensions for the widths of road and shoulder are below what is required by our code. Our code does allow for variations to this standard, provided they have approval from the town council. Because the applicant has requested that the town accept and maintain these roads, in referring this application to our maintenance department, they determined that, yes, we'd be able to accept and maintain these roads, provided they meet our town standards, including no on-street parking. One of the largest concerns voiced in this referral process was the ability to store the snow that would need to be removed from these roads. And so Bobby Block from our maintenance department is here to speak about snow storage at this particular site, potentially kind of some of the other issues that we have in town, although not caused by this, but are related to if we need to haul any snow from this site, where would that snow go? It's a lot easier to push snow, it's a lot faster to push snow than it is to pick up snow and move it somewhere else. As anybody that's shoveled out a driveway, we know it. I'm sure it's everybody in this room. So Bobby, if you are ready, I'd like to pull up the snow storage plan, that way we can share your comments on that. I believe the applicant senior engineers, or
I don't think he made it,
he did make it, okay.
but I can probably answer.
And I'm just gonna pull up that snow storage plan, so allow me to shift gears, please. So. I do, just wanna say one thing, it's gonna be difficult to have this like at full scale and everybody be able to see it because of the symbology used. But I think generally speaking, Bobby can speak to kind of the issues that that brought to, staff's attention, in the referral process.
So one of the main things that I'm seeing here is if we're on that Boulevard Road, the only place that is really snow storage is the, as you're looking at it, west and south side as it comes around the loop. With no snow storage on the other side. Typically, when a plow goes through, you pull snow from the double yellow and you push it to the white line. On Boulevard, that's not really an option. If you go in, and we don't have to do that right now, but if you go in and overlay L.1.03, a lot of that snow storage area is also incorporated with landscaping. If you were to try and put snow in that 10-foot median, you still have to contend with landscaping to get that snow out of that median. As people in this room can tell you, I have a crew that we have to repair a lot of what we rip up, and we know where it is and we still mistake. If you've got people trying to plow it that haven't plowed, there's a lot of stuff you could be fixing. If we go over to the snow storage area for the Village Core Road site, so it'd be the lower left there. If you take that photo and you overlay that also with the L.1.03, what's not depicted here, one, you've got bus stops to contend with. They generate more snow than just a road. Road gets a little wider. This parking lot right out in front of us, we have to push the snow up and out and around the corner of this building. And this parking lot is a 45-minute to an hour plow when we get 12 inches of snow. If you were to take all that snow from Village Core Road and try to put it in that corner, the time to get it all there would be substantial. Those are the biggest things I'm looking at.
And by the 45-minute time frame he just provided, that's for the town hall parking lot. I wasn't sure if that was clear.
Heather, do you have anything to add to Bobby's comments? Heather needs the microphone. So maybe.
Hand that back over.
Just that I'd suggest we get together, Bobby, Public Works, you and I don't imagine anything is insurmountable. And so we can just look at landscape, what we have, what we can do with the median. I didn't fully understand necessarily why we wouldn't stack in the boulevard. Like that's a different road standard than you guys have anywhere else, I think. So I would just say we do that work session, figure out what they need, and we can make those adjustments.
Yeah, I think perhaps because snow storage,
Yeah, it wasn't
not be-
indicated.
it's not
in that
indicated in the
median.
median,
Exactly.
and so it's assumed that there wouldn't be snow storage there, and that we'd somehow be removing it from the median, so I think it's.
That's
a
what
lot
I
of
was
this
looking at too. Yeah.
Cleaning up of the plan, and so
think
one
so
of the
too.
conditions that has been identified when we get there is to address the snow storage plan before the next planning commission meeting, just in case there has to be any site planning changes, that those can be accommodated and addressed seen by the planning commission rather than report to council.
Also, with the density proposed at the core, the sites themselves are going to have to provide substantial snow storage. And so maybe they could be integrated with what's needed for the roads.
And we will let the people that are good at designing snow storage do that, in offline.
Not me.
But it's definitely a great point to make, is that consolidation of these of this snow storage, areas could be considered as part of the overall programming for the application.
And I mean, within the tract, so much of that depends on the final architecture and roof dump and things like that. So I think we're definitely focused on the larger infrastructure, where to make sure that's stored, and then each tract would deal, but anywhere where they could be consolidated, and we could reference that, you know, from like a notation perspective.
What I'm actually saying is that you may need to provide some space in the tract that's dedicated to snow storage for the roads. The tracks
Yeah,
are.
I mean, yeah.
The tracks
right,
are
we
bumper
have
to
that.
bumper
Yep,
there,
Yep,
so,
right,
you know, the snow's gonna
Yeah.
go somewhere.
yeah.
Good thing is that we have lots of space.
Yeah.
to work
Right
with.
now.
So we have, even after they build out, there's still almost 100 acres sitting out
Yeah.
there that's available, so we will find ways to accommodate for sure.
Bobby has a
Yep.
comment.
Oh, Bobby, microphone. Sorry.
Like a Jerry
Sorry
Springer
about that.
show.
And then one of the other thoughts that comes up with that is typically our town, other towns, snow can't go across a right of way. Snow needs to be stored on the property that it falls on. So as far as trying to push snow out of private residences and get them to store in the right of way, I'm not sure what the code is on that. I'd have to ask Nate, but there's actually a code that doesn't allow that to happen. So anytime you do have snow storage, there will be, if the town were to integrate the roads, the town would be in charge of the right of way and road snow storage. And then the another one is the one up there on the right, the conceptual snow storage area for developed site, making sure that that snow storage isn't falling into what would be right of way of road. We run into a lot of issues with private snow being stored in right of way. Just more thought when we move into that work session.
Give your hand up.
I did. So otherwise, the roads meet all the standards for the town to accept them or no?
It would require town council approval. To have the reduction in road width and provided shoulder width, however, there is adequate right of way provided. And town council is able to waive that, make a variation to that requirement. And I believe that, I'm not having it up on my screen here, I believe that, actually, believe the condition says, I'm actually just gonna look at it, that way I reference it. Watching me try to find this.
So while you're looking, go ahead, if you're ready.
So there is a condition in here, sorry, that town council approve the dimensions of the proposed road circulation network. Provided there is a recommendation of approval and acceptance from the maintenance department on all roads to be accepted by town. So what the recommendation section has attempted to achieve is providing some latitude in this in discussions with Bobby, and Bobby, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that potentially this could work if snow storage is addressed. Because from what I understood in our conversations, and he's shaking his head, yes, that a blade can fit in the provided road width. It's just where is the snow going to go within the network that the town could potentially be accepting.
Okay.
So a roundabout way of saying maybe.
Okay, got it. And then my last on that is, granted, the proposal now has significantly less density than the last one. And there was some heartache by some folks about the one road in and the one road out. And we heard repeatedly from the applicant that the whole design of that boulevard and the sidewalks was gonna really lead to flexibility for emergency needs. So now when we start talking about doing snow storage in the boulevard, that
Paved surfaces are still cleared.
Yeah.
The commuter trail, the 2 lanes, you're stacking in the landscape in the middle.
Okay.
It's not drivable. And then there's paths that use it, so.
That's all I had.
So kind of along those lines, I know that the last letter from the fire district is from 2021. Has the fire district been able to review the newer plan with the reduced road width?
No, reduced road
There's,
width.
the road with, has not changed since the fire department has looked at it. The density has changed, but the roads have not.
Okay, I heard you say a minute ago that there was gonna be, the council was considering a
So the-
reduced road width,
The,
so.
the road width reduction was reviewed by the fire department in 2021. The road configuration actually has not changed.
Correct.
And in fact, we've added the boulevard all the way to.
Doesn't,
Or we extended it.
You extended it to the quarter.
doesn't the reduced pavement width, given the right of ways remain the same, actually create more snow storage area along the road?
I'm not tracking.
We'd have to
I
calculate.
mean,
It's
you're
about
doing
the
less
same.
plowing if the road is narrower.
So Bobby
Well,
said
yeah.
you can't store in the right. of way.
The one thing that we run into in this plan, you may have seen us last year trying to clean Gothic up between the 2 Paradise Roads. Is yes, you have a reduced lane width, but once you start adding pedestrian walkway. Now you have another 8-hour width of the pedestrian walkway. You have to do something with that snow as well as the road snow. And if you've ever tried to walk from basically Snowmass Road down to Crystal or Castle, we plow it off the rec path and the plow comes by and plows it right back onto the rec path. And it is a continuous battle with less right away to put the snow in because now you've got sidewalk there.
Time for a melter.
So it sounds.
I have that info too.
So what I'm hearing is that, we could potentially move on from this particular topic. And, we can address the snow storage component with within the recommendation section. And that, the applicant team and town staff will work on a snow storage plan that meets the needs of our maintenance team.
Love it.
Good for us.
Okay.
Can I highlight one transit? You don't have any more transit or traffic slides or transportation slides?
I don't.
Yeah, I know.
No, you gotta parking next.
Beg pardon?
Parking is not.
Yeah, go to parking next, all right.
So if you could just show the illustrative, so we did our final like walkthrough and work session with Mountain Express as well. And they basically said that turn off from Gothic into the like bus stop near the visitor center didn't make sense, so you'll see in the final plans, there's no bus turnaround off of Gothic, you would come in and our first bus stop is right at the visitor center. And then there's another one at Rumble, there's another one at track 10, and then there's one in the village, and they are pull in, pull out as Mountain Express requested.
Yeah, I didn't see a letter from Mountain Express. Was there one?
Should
Yeah,
have
I
been-
think there was one.
Somewhere.
Yes.
It's in the packet, I can't see it. Somebody said
4,320.
I didn't get that big a packet, but it's.
It's exhibit.
Mountain Express letter.
Thank
There
you.
is a letter of support in there, thank you. So,
Thank you. So it is a little past 8. I want to know what staff's plan is to,
we're almost at the end of this presentation.
okay,
So staff's plan would be ideally to get through the next couple of slides and hopefully we can limit to the dialogue to just really like necessary points and then just kind of streamline the process to get us to recommendation for the continuation.
okay.
The parking is fairly straightforward. Parking on a given track will meet today's parking code, so they are in effect memorializing the parking code within the PUD. The town does not want to accept any roads that permit for on-street parking. On-street parking has been a continued point of discussion. In this application, it's shown on the civil plans. So town is requesting a parking plan indicating where on-street parking will be located. That way we can understand how it relates to the roads that we would potentially be accepting. Heather, do you have anything to add to that?
They shouldn't be on the civil plan, so that's my bad, my apology. We pulled the concept of on-street parking, so it would be that the civil wasn't updated. So we'll just make sure the civil plan is updated.
Okay.
To remove on-street parking.
Easy peasy.
Question,
Yes, sir.
can parking on a given tract meet today's parking code be as amended?
So I can meet the staff rationale for the reason why, today's parking code has been, memorialized, because a lot of the site programming and the ability to accommodate certain density was also made based on today's parking standards. So say we have a completely different parking standard in 5 years where we're requiring 5 spaces per single family residence, or just, I'm throwing out wild numbers for
You
the
are.
sake of making it extreme, in that like all of a sudden you have this massive parking requirement that never allows you to realize the entitlements. So the reason for tying today's parking code to the, to this, application, or I'm sorry, the PUD guide, is so that the density that's being proposed can actually be realized on a given site without being impacted by changes in the parking code, because it affects site programming to such a degree.
That makes
We
sense.
would concur, and because you were really requesting that specificity, to codify the specificity meant there it is locked in.
And that speaks kind of the flexibility component, because right now they're coming through and saying, we're definitely building 10 units here. It's gonna generate this amount of parking. It's essentially aligning with that request while still providing that flexibility within the density and the number of units on a given tract.
I would just add, and I don't know, this might have already been done, but with that being the case, that should be, whatever the parking requirement is, should be in the tract, in the PUD guide for the specific tract.
Yes.
It might have already been done.
Hillary said put it somewhere else.
It was in one tract, and it was like the actual parking code stuff I wanted pulled out in some section, and then each tract referred to that rather than.
Well, even if it's in the PUD guide saying the parking,
Yeah,
this,
here
have
it
that
is.
equal to this, and not just a statement that says it will meet the town's.
No,
It's
in there
it's
now.
all in. Yeah,
Yeah.
The whole code.
the whole, yeah.
Go back and find it.
Right.
Yes. Great point. All right, any questions on parking? Wonderful. Utilities, pretty straightforward. Electric, sewer, and water utilities will be installed under the road as it's constructed and spurred to the Rumble tract. It's part of phase 1 by the master developer. DIA will be required with monetary security at final plan, not the monetary security itself, but the DIA documentation. And then individual tract development routes will require site-specific utility plans. Any questions on utilities?
Or it could be gas or no gas, because I've read gas and one and no gas.
Yeah, one of the civils did say gas.
No,
They still have the line work.
we can take
we're
that
at
off.
no gas.
No gas.
There is no code-based requirement to require gas to be extended.
Telecommunication, are you assuming everything's gonna be satellite?
No, then we'll have telecommunications lines as well.
Okay, it's
Well,
just-
our lines.
All right, it's just not on Hillary's slide, but it's probably in the
Hey.
PUD guide.
Hillary update.
Yeah,
Add
yeah.
that to the to-do list.
We've been told we have fiber that would be available, have an available fiber capacity. Ultimately, so.
And that is indicated on their civil plans, is the dry utilities, which includes that, communications, line.
Thank you.
Corey, you had.
That was my question.
Okay,
So
wonderful.
there's not gonna be gas, but we use gas to make the electricity.
Not necessarily, hopefully not within the
We
next
burn
10
coal.
years.
Coal, water, what about the water?
I just,
Now,
I,
The supply to.
I hear what you're
I've
saying,
said my
but,
piece.
there's nothing that they can do about where the electricity comes from unless you're buying credits and that.
They
sort of thing.
could offer the ability to have gas.
Not a code based requirement.
No, but it has been a requirement that, a topic of discussion over the last year and a half. And
Well, I mean, we're good, our stance is, we're not gonna do gas again, it's, I think electrification of the grid at the end user is the most important part. For the rest of the grid to come green. But that's our piece.
GCA's objective is to decarbonize.
well, I mean,
Ultimately, the idea. And we're not.
I mean, rarely do we have power outages. I've never had a gas outage and I heat my house on gas.
Been a big one.
We had that one big one, yes, and then a baby boom.
But we got electricity to back it up
Right.
because we didn't have gas, so.
I just think it's a mistake and I'm not gonna be buying a lot up there, but that's okay.
Are we good to move on from utilities?
Yep. Yes.
Thank you, and your point is noted. The water and sewer services, so water's been a point of conversation throughout this application process. The stance of the sanitation or water and sanitation district on this and every application is going to be essentially the same moving forward, and we will not receive any additional documentation from water and sanitation of in terms of this application above and beyond the letter that has already been provided. The applicant did provide a water analysis. But I think what's most important to note with regards to this application is that the water and sanitation district bases their demand on full build out of their service area, and that calculation is based on 1,800 units at North Village and the commercial development that is proposed, or that is a part of that 2000 something, 6 or 7, I can't remember now, entitlement. So the calculation, or I'm sorry, they're basing their ability to serve their in like their water treatment plant needs on a number that's much larger than being proposed. So I, as a member of staff, I have a level of comfort in the letter provided and then knowing that this is a reduction with regard to the number of units that the water and sanitation bases their need and for both providing water and addressing effluent.
Question.
Yes.
Given what you just said, then why are we requiring a feasibility study? And water and sand has to sign off on it.
Because that is a part of the latter part of the code. Or it's part of the code that a feasibility study is provided for a proposed subdivision, so that would be similar to what was provided for Hunter Ridge. And so we would require that and a statement of acceptance of that plan. Just let me just see when that would be required. That's final, yes. So that would be more of a final design. What?
It's design.
Yeah,
So it's not feasibility, it's a design study, it's design.
that's the language that's in our code, so that's why it says that, but yes, it's designed.
Okay.
formally. Which is why it's required at final design and not now.
Okay.
But an important distinction to make, thank you for pointing that out.
So to clarify, when you're saying final design, you mean final design review of tracks?
Of the utilities, yes,
The infrastructure.
PUD final.
yeah, PUD fund. not-
PV fund.
Yeah, not now. Okay. But yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
As part of this overall process. Right. Not at a specific track design.
right, okay.
And it's for the infrastructure, the macro.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Correct.
I think we're all clear on utilities, the timing of that, not feasibility study.
Even though that's what it's.
Yeah. No code is perfect, it's written by human beings. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Service and maintenance plan have been provided. It identifies master developer, said what they're going to provide, so I will not repeat that. The master developer will be maintaining and removing snow from all roads not dedicated and accepted by the town. In addition to construction and maintenance of, I misspelled maintenance, the following improvements: parking areas, curbs, gutters, culverts, drainage ditches, detention ponds, sidewalks, bridges, paving, lighting, landscaping, and other road, street, and drainage facility improvements, as well as necessary traffic and safety protection devices and controls. So essentially, everything else that makes up the ecosystem of the village of Mount CB will be responsibility of the master HOA. And then there will be sub HOAs. And the improvements on those individual tracks will be the responsibility of the track developer and then maintained by the master association. There have been cost estimates provided for the improvements identified in phase one, but as we all know, we are in a very volatile market and those projections might not be accurate at the time of construction. So a GIA again will be required with the Montero security at final plan. The plan doesn't, the one issue is that the plan doesn't address how open spaces and common buildings will be maintained if applicable. And staff recommends that the plan be amended to address these project elements where applicable. So a relatively minor detail in the overall scope of the service and maintenance plan. Are there any questions on this aspect of the application? Okay. I can finish present. That's the last page.
Not present.
So that was a long presentation, but I believe a necessary
Yes.
overall summary of the application.
Hour and 45 minutes.
It's much easier to digest.
283 pages worth.
It was,
Yes.
yeah, it was a lot of writing.
600 more to go.
Mostly pictures.
So in discussing with the applicant, I believe that, unless there's anything else that you want to add, I know that we've addressed some of your comments and concerns as we've been going throughout each of the slides. Do you have anything else to add for planning commission's consideration?
Yeah, I had like a 2-hour presentation.
You're next.
Okay, more pizza.
You've had several.
We should have done it earlier, but I speak for our entire team saying thank you very much. You know, sometimes this public process can be a little painful, but it results in better projects and better fit for the community and everything else. And we have really appreciated and frankly enjoyed our, I guess, reboot. I'll steal Hillary's, our recalibration.
Village 2.0.
Village 2.0. And so just thank you. It sounds like we're down to a final few things and
You know, a lot of work has gone into this.
For anything else that the planning commission has, or would you all like me to start looking at their recommendations?
Well, I did not have time to read the PUD guide.
I didn't
You
either.
did a great job condensing it. I haven't read the design guidelines or the covenants. I mean, I've glanced at them and I need time to look through those.
Like me to do for you.
Well, you're recommending that we continue this, so,
That might give you the opportunity to review the rest of the
yes,
stuff.
yes, it would.
Okay. We knew that this was gonna be a really big application and that it's essentially a recalibration of what you'd seen before, so we didn't have the expectation or we want to put the pressure on you to make a decision to move, you know, this application along the process now. And what staff attempted to do was pull together all of the points that were germane to previous discussions or those other big ticket items or things that we might need to address in the conditions in order to help y'all make a recommendation to continue and then provide the applicant with the guidance that they need in order to potentially move forward at the next meeting was the intent of this. Now, whether the commission is ready for that, I don't get to dictate your terms, but that was the intent in trying to front load as much information as possible and why my presentation took 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Well, we appreciate that, and I think you did a fabulous job of covering the changes and the new, essentially a new application. And I like Sarah, I have had a chance to read the PUD guide and or the letter from the buses. So, yeah, I think, does the applicant have any questions for the planning commission?
Probably just, I guess, let's call it a statement of, hope. So what we would like to be prepared, what we are prepared to do on our end of the next meeting, is yay or nay to the concerns, yay or nay. And then we would really like to push for a vote at the next meeting. And I can give them time to review. You have, I'd like to see this, we'll do yay or nay.
Well, I think you could have been asked for some additional
Yeah,
information.
so on the recommendations and conditions prior to the next planning commission, we have no issues with those. Work session on the roads, snow storage, on-street goes away. We spoke to Rumble about taking a little bit of time in the next meeting and the open space ownership. So we're totally on with those.
Okay,
I'm thinking like if this whole, like a whole bunch of other stuff comes up again at the next meeting, we'll be prepared to just sort of say yes, no, so that we can maybe try and put a bow on this. Would be awesome. Yeah, yeah, obviously just a step.
Staff recommends if the commission consider going through this, recommendations and see if there's anything that we'd like to add at this time that could be provided at the next planning commission meeting, and then just address the rest of the, recommendations for the subsequent steps. That's it.
I think that would be a great start to the next meeting. I think going through your recommendations, which I've done 3 times now, which are very well done, will, and I don't know who's read them, and who hasn't, that's where I start. I think that'd be a great place to start the next meeting, but I would like to finish reading the rest of the documentation, which of course you have read in making your recommendation.
I've read a lot of documentation.
So that would be my way forward, would be continue until the next available planning commission date. And then go through that.
You're
That's
talking,
at the start.
and you're talking about these items, all of these items in section 3?
I'm talking. It wasn't
This is-
section 3, it was.
This
the
was
second
Hillary's, Hillary's staff report,
Section
So-
3 is staff report.
What I'm
recommendations and
hearing-
conditions.
So we have, so some of the recommendations in here, 1 through 6, is recommendations for items for the applicant to address before the next planning commission meeting. And you are, what I hear is that you would like to discuss the recommendations at the next meeting. So I'm trying to reconcile what to do with recommendations 1 through 6 at this time, since that would you like those things to be completed before that next meeting? That way, if planning commission were ready at that time, we had no issues with any of the documentation that hasn't had the opportunity to be reviewed, that you'd be able to move forward at that next meeting.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
And then if I missed some huge thing in the PUD guide, we can discuss it at that next meeting, but hopefully.
Track 11.
Sorry.
It's in there, just wasn't on the slide.
Don't open the door. You don't want me to walk through. Okay.
I think all he was missing was 1 page. That was pretty darn good.
You got a 99 this time.
100%.
So I would move that we continue this review to the next available planning commission meeting, assuming that that's okay with the applicant.
Yeah, you guys have these here.
I would, well, we have the 6 items, so I'd like to know that those 6 items were addressed. Well, maybe part of the motion, but before we schedule that meeting, the next available meeting is 2 weeks from today. But I don't want to say that for certain until we know that 6, we can shoot for that.
There's only 5.
We also don't do the date certain, thing here, so there's that.
Next available.
But we got it.
If your ducks in a row, we can make meetings.
By next Thursday.
Sounds
2 weeks, yeah, well, there's,
Yeah,
yeah.
package.
That's the,
Okay.
submittal.
Yeah.
Deadline, right?
I'll make my motion again. I would move that we continue this application until the next available planning commission meeting.
A second.
Thanks, Sarah. Is there any discussion on that? Staff call the roll.
Pizza? Yes. Reed?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Dusty?
Yes. Okey doke. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, good work.
Is there any other business?
I'll make this quick because it is almost 8:30. Our next meeting schedule, we will have a meeting regardless of North Village, but for North Village, as well as 2 design reviews for the same parcel for the bridges on Columbine Hill. That is, how would you describe that? Above.
Right now, they want to call
Columbine.
it cinnamon. I mean, new name.
Yeah, formerly known as Bridges on Columbine. I wouldn't know where we're talking.
Does Bill keep Gamble?
No, but it is now Bill Cove. And then just a point of clarification, just so you guys know, we have a work session on Tuesday. Thank you, Bobby. Those that attended on Zoom, you get compensated.
Oh,
for
good.
that. But the policy of the town for regular meetings where items are discussed and action is taken. If you are via Zoom, you're not permitted to participate or vote. You can listen, of course, but you can't participate or vote. And if you are attending that meeting via Zoom, you do not get compensated for those meetings. This is like difference between those 2, but everyone who attended Tuesday's work session, whether Zoom or in person, will get compensated for that. Just know that that's not necessarily the case for a regular.
Along that
So I
line,
got to relive.
along that line,
Can the town provide adequate parking for its?
We've been working on that for when weddings coincide with these meetings.
I thought I was doing you a favor by making you a parking space.
It was poor planning today.
Not just.
Yeah. Well, Tuesday was the best we could do. We moved everything with the best we could on Tuesday.
Yeah,
But when you have a meeting and a wedding,
well, maybe we have a central calendar that we're looking at.
well, we have one during the year that take place.
I think it's safe to assume that there's gonna be a wedding every single day this summer.
Wednesdays are better.
Well,
We moved our meetings.
It's varied on Tuesdays, but
Lots
it's
of
varied on
people.
Tuesdays now, so.
Because the weekends are.
because the weekends are
Yeah,
full.
exactly, so
But-
that's why
I don't think we can solve that problem, but we can do better. I admit. I got here at 4:30 and was moving 4 cars and that's the best.
Yeah, okay, I mean, it's-
But you're right, I know.
like I said,
When I
I
called in, Lisa was pulling out, I was like, oh, shoot, she doesn't have quite.
I thought by attending the meeting via Zoom, I was creating a parking space, so.
Yeah.
But then half the council didn't even show up.
Yeah.
they missed a valuable opportunity to gain insight on some of the recommendations in the master plan. Sorry.
They will gain that later, I'm certain.
Oh, yeah, you guys are so stick with me after all of this, you're gonna be like, I'm never going.
We love you.
We can talk after. Or you want to say?
Well, I want everybody to hear because it goes back to your Zoom thing. I would like to know, how is it that the Crested Butte Town Council can attend by Zoom, participate and vote? Yet we
It's the
can't.
policy made by our town council that if you are attending via Zoom, you cannot participate or vote. That's
So it's from the council,
Yes.
just the policy.
Yeah.
And that's probably to make the council show up.
They didn't show up, did they?
Well,
Yeah. They were.
the way they do that in
Zoom or
in
otherwise.
Mute is you can only attend by Zoom to a certain number of meetings.
Yeah.
That's how they get around.
I got to watch the Zoom of the last meeting that went on for 3 hours and I did not get paid for it.
Yeah.
That's really only, well.
I'm less concerned about
One
getting
of the
paid for
benefits
it.
of attending the meeting would be just that, is that you could listen to it live versus having to come back and listen to the tape in order to be informed.
We can vote them out.
Let's do it.
So we have.
Yeah, that's all right.
We do need a motion. I'll move to adjourn.
Second. All in favor, please leave.
Please say.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. I'll see you now. Great. But I know it's a lot to get through, so thank